Thank you so much for having me. My name is Stephanie Ruhle, and unfortunately, I think I'm going to say the exact opposite of what the great John Hope Bryant said. I think we're both talking about the same thing, creating hope and opportunity. But John's talking about great big things. How do you become a great leader, a great cultural leader, business leader? How do you excel in academia? I mean, John had so many hashtags, I don't even think there's any left. And everything that we're doing, there's pressure right now to make a big impact. This conference, I'm guessing it's live streamed and YouTubed and Instagram storied because we're counting all of those impressions. And there's so much pressure to do that. It's graduation season. And parents are saying, should I let my daughter leave college early because she might be the next Mark Zuckerberg? Maybe. But maybe in this pursuit for greatness, we've let something fall out. And that's goodness and humanity and being good because we're on this quest for greatness. So I've worked in media for the last 8 years, and the 14 years prior, I worked in investment banking. And on my very first day on a trading floor, we were all coming from the training program, and we took our exams, and we were ready to go. And the person standing next to me was years later would become my husband. But we both walked onto a trading floor that day, but he came from an Ivy League school, and he went to a really fancy all-boys prep school. And at that Ivy League college, he played lacrosse. Now, when you walk onto a trading floor of any investment bank, there's an enormous amount of guys who played college lacrosse. Now, there is no correlation between playing lacrosse and being good at trading bonds, but I promise those boys fill trading floors. One of the highest paid jobs out there. Now, I don't begrudge them for it, but what a great network they have. An informal network of guys just trying to hook one another up, help one another out. They created a community. When he walked onto a trading floor, there were 30 guys willing to say, hey, come over here, I'm gonna teach you, I'm gonna help you. And he got hooked up. When I walked onto a trading floor, there were no public school girls from New Jersey. Imagine if I was a public school girl from New Jersey who was African American or Latino. I wouldn't have had a community. There was no see it to be it. So in response to that, what have we seen in the last 20 years? So many organizations, so many activist groups, especially since the last election. People are engaged. They see the divide, they see the problems in our environment, in our culture, in society, and they're saying, let's create initiatives to change this. And I'm kind of saying, we're chock full of giant initiatives and giant hashtags and giant campaigns. But what we're short on is people just helping one another out. When I worked in investment banking, I founded the first women's network across corporate investment banks. And you would get bank CEOs to spend all this money for these great big conferences, and all the executives would come to the conferences, and the CEO would speak at the beginning of the event, and all of his reports would be right in the front row. And then when he'd be done, they'd all walk out the side door. And we would all still be sitting there looking at one another. And they're happy to spend all that money ticking the box and having a, we're not good, we're great, you know, we don't just care, we really care slogans. But imagine if the people who are in the middle of those organizations got a little bit more free time or got paid a little bit more. And they would then take the time to just teach somebody and help them out. We're putting all of this pressure now on young people entering the workforce. You must go to networking events. We say to young women, we say to diversity groups, find a mentor, find a sponsor. If you don't find a mentor, you'll never get ahead. A mentor is your key to success. Yes, that is a good idea, but it's also a great idea to just be good at your job. Instead, we're saying to these young women specifically, yes, you should leave work at 4 o'clock because you got to get to this networking event. Giving them this idea that if you go to this networking event, you are going to meet this very senior woman in business, and she'll have gone to your high school, and she'll absolutely adore you, and she's going to make you her chief of staff. I mean, that is like saying to young people, buy a Powerball ticket because that's how you're going to win this game. But instead, what if we said, we don't need credit for starting an initiative. We don't need to be a formal mentor. What if we just said, I'm going to spend a little more of my time helping someone, teaching someone something every day? Because when you actually inject that little bit of humanity and caring about someone in a way that you're not getting paid for, you're not getting recognized for, and you're not getting clicks for, then that person is actually going to care about you. Because if you are the person who's sitting on top of the world, you're the big boss, if you were good to all those people on your way up, when the winds change and you start to fall, and all of us start to fall, all those people you were good to along the way are going to have your back. Because you see it. You see when someone starts to fall and everyone kind of steps out of the way and lets them fall, that's a sign that they didn't really treat people that well on their way up. And so as much as I agree with John is a great man, and John wants people to do great things, and he's doing great things. I think we need to care about people on a micro level a little bit more. 2 years ago, and I agree with John, I'm careful in telling the story because I know it's political, but I don't want it to be. I worry very much about the divide in this country. I'm in the news business. We talk about the rise in hate every day. But where I feel a sense of hope is I'm not sure I think it's hate across the board. And you might be able to say, it's easy for you to say that, Stephanie. You've not experienced it. But what I think is there's a whole lot of hopelessness. All of us want the same thing. We're all trying to take care of our families. Every person wants to be socially free, physically safe, financially secure. We're just trying to take care of our families. And so many people, in our quest to get to the top, have been left out. Soon after the election, I was at a dude ranch in upstate New York with my husband and children. And the owner of the dude ranch said, a waitress would like to come and talk to you. And I said, great. And luckily, I shooed my children off the table because there was a lot of choice words in the story she told. But she came over and she said, I want to tell you why I love President Trump. And I said, please sit down. And she said, I love the president because he loves me. And I said, I want you to tell me why you think that. And she said, because he came here, he sees me. He came and he had a rally here, he speaks to me. And I was pushing her a little bit, and I said, tell me what policies he's going to put forth to help you. And she said, I don't know about that stuff. And she goes, but I'm going to tell you about my life. She goes, where do you live, New York City? And I said, yes. This woman was about 55, she was white. And she said, this restaurant that I work in, she said, they give me enough hours that I can't get a second job, but they don't give me enough hours to provide me with health care. And she said, where you live, do you have charter schools? And I completely fell for it. And I said, yes, my husband is the board chair of a charter school. And she said, oh, really? We have the worst public schools in New York State. And that's where my grandchildren go to school. And my grandchildren who need some services, they don't have them. So I need to call the county, and nobody answers the phone there. Everything she was saying was right. And she said, where you live? And she goes, do you raise money for after-school programs, Big Brother, Big Sister, Girls Inc.? And I said, yes. And she said, we don't have any of those programs. Because if you look at charitable contributions, organizations across the country, they're mostly in urban centers. They're not in rural America. And she went on, and she said, here's the thing. My story isn't sad enough for you. I don't have grandchildren that are washing up on shore in a boat, so I won't make the cover of your newspaper. But I'm not pretty enough to go to your house for dinner. And here's the thing. She's right. Because we didn't care about her. We didn't care about her enough. And something has been lost in caring about our neighbors. And I notice it more and more in New York, actually. My mom, who lives in New Jersey, who comes to see me every week, knows everybody on my block. She knows all the doormen on my block. She knows everybody. Because she grew up at a time and she exists in a world where being neighborly is part of her life. And that is something that we've lost. And I think people don't talk about it because you don't really get credit for it. And there's no impressions for it. And nobody's writing college essays about it. And I'm not trying to say that all of these amazing campaigns out there aren't great. It is extraordinary how many Americans have become activated in the last couple of years. When I look at all the marches, the movements, they're incredible. But I also think we simply need to care about people that we don't. John was talking earlier about being the party of green. There's little ways you can do it. You know, they don't teach home economics in school anymore. And home economics wasn't just sewing and cooking. They also taught you a personal budget. So we don't offer that in any curriculum anymore. We don't offer financial literacy. So if kids are growing up in a home where there's not, and it's traditionally a father who knows anything about stocks or bonds, where are they going to learn about that? How are they going to know how to start a savings account? So I'm asking, if you're so fortunate that you know anything like that, don't just teach your kids. When your kids' friends are over, just teach them. I'm saying, it sounds terrible. Don't start another organization. We have so many. There are so many. Please don't start another one. We don't need another hashtag. We got Lean It, we got Lean It, we got all of them. I'm saying beneath all of those, please just take whatever your expertise is, whatever your gift is, whatever kindness you have left in your heart, and give it to someone else. I see it in the news. Sorry, thank you. Because we have fallen into a situation in the news where we're talking to ourselves. And it's easy to think someone is your enemy or a villain when you don't know them or look at them and touch them. And that woman who I met in New York State, if you hadn't heard her story, if you had read her views on a piece of paper, or if you knew about her profile, you might say she was hateful, you might say she was anti-immigrant, you might say she was racist. She was hopeless. And I'm not saying that her views were good, I'm not saying I agree with any of them, I don't. But where I feel a shred of hope, her views aren't rooted in hate. She has more privilege than she realizes, that's true, but she's still suffering. And people in our daily life are every single day. And I'm just asking you to look for that person and care about them tomorrow.